All right. Today, Anna and I are tackling a big subject, and that's basically trying to help you determine if your ex still cares. So, basically, what you're going to get out of this podcast episode or YouTube, wherever you're watching this, is we're going to be diving into the science of longing, yearning, and nostalgia, but specifically, Anna was telling me something really fascinating before we started recording. She believes, and the science backs her up on this, your ex is hardwired to where they can't just forget about you.
Hmm.
They are hardwired to specifically care about you. So that kind of answers the question of if your ex still cares about you. But we're going to kind of give you the why and help you apply it to your situation so that you can get great results going forward. But, anyways, my co host, partner in crime, Anna, is here. And we're just going to try to tackle this in the most organic way possible. So you were telling me about research. I feel like we should just dive into the new research because that was the thing that was fascinating me.
Yeah. This is where I was geeking out as usual, right? Because
You're
when I
right.
was in college, like what were some of my majors, like physics and neuroscience. So I love
Oh, I
sciencey
didn't
stuff.
know that. I didn't know
Yeah.
that.
Well, okay, three of them: women's studies, neuroscience, and physics. So I'm a big geek, science
Well,
geek.
you're perfect for this job. You're perfect for the breakup job.
Yeah, I actually think so because I love thinking about the science of relationships. Because it helped me. Trying to
uh,
understand
so
what was
I
going
mean,
on.
you're getting the neuroscience, but also you're getting the women's studies because most
Yeah,
of our clients, we do get men, but the vast majority are women.
yeah,
So
yeah. So
you're right. You're right where you belong.
So, okay. So what was really interesting? So there was actually a study that was published this year, and it was done. I think the research was done last year, but it's essentially the science of longing for loved ones. So that study found that reuniting with our partners activates a unique cluster of brain cells, which motivates us to establish lifelong relationships. Now, interestingly, if you've ever heard me talk about this in the ERP Facebook group, because I talk about this all the time, or if you've ever coached with me, human males have a varied number of receptors, which are known in other mammals to gate, or for in layman's terms, to meter, right, the degree of monogamous behavior that they have, which when you measure them for genetic variants, right, that's fancy speak, it could have an effect on the amount of oxytocin in men, which is the neurochemical involved in bonding and connection, one of the five, right? So this body of literature suggests that different people, and in the very least men, have a different biology from women. Some men may be more or less wired for monogamy than others, which means also that couples may or may not be meant to stick together depending on different factors. But in this particular study, it was a brain imaging study of prairie voles, right? Which are, which, okay, it's good. It sounds funny, but prairie voles are among only about 5% of the mammalian species besides humans who are monogamous. So there's a lot of relationship. So when there's a lot of relationship studies done, it's often done with prairie voles. All right. And it was found that when it comes to forming bonds, longing or yearning is just as important as actually being together with that person. It sheds light on a number of things, including why it's so hard for everyone to be socially distant from one another. It could also lead to new therapies, I think, for conditions like autism and depression. Anyway, so I'm off topic. But when it comes to forming long term bonds, our longing for a partner is as important as, if not more important than, how we react when we're with them. So, all right, in order to maintain relationships over time, there has to be obviously some motivation to be with that person when you're away from them, right? So, this 2020 paper is the very first one to pinpoint the potential neural basis for the motivation to reunite with an ex. So, the paper, I think, could lead us to better understand what brain regions, all the way down to the cellular level, drive the instinct to form lasting bonds between men and women, or men and men, or women and women, right? So the research also lends insight into why social distancing is so tough. So human beings are uniquely hardwired to seek out close relationships as a source of comfort. And that often comes through physical touch. All right.
Mm.
Previous brain imaging research in humans has also shown altered brain activity in the region called the nucleus accumbens, right? Which is the same reward center that lights up during heroin or cocaine use. We've talked about this before in its relationship to no contact and why it's so difficult to get through a no contact, or why we long for our exes, or it's difficult to stick to it, right? When the research subject held the hand of a romantic partner versus a stranger. So at first, this team in this study assumed that brain activity would be really different when the prairie voles were cuddling with their mate versus a random vole, right? But surprisingly, that is not what they found. It didn't matter if it was a stranger or lover. The voles' brains looked basically the same when they were together with another vole. It was only when the voles were away from their partner and running to meet their partner. Like imagine a classic romantic reunion scene at the airport, right? Or the theme of any number of love poems or any sitcom, right? That unique cluster of cells in the nucleus accumbens constantly and consistently fired. So the longer the animals had been paired together, the longer and closer, or the stronger and closer their bond became, right? So the larger the growing cluster of cells, those were dubbed the partner approach ensemble on image screens. So, and a completely different cluster of cells lit up when the voles were around stranger voles, like strangers. So, what does this mean? This suggests that there are a group of cells for this specific purpose that's important for forming and maintaining a bond with your loved one. So what we suspect, or what I took from this, is that the brain chemicals like oxytocin, dopamine, and vasopressin, three of the neurochemicals that we talk about in the 11 levers of reattraction, right? And they have also been shown in both animal and human studies to play a role in trust and closeness and bonding and connection, are also involved. But it's not, so what this study does confirm is that monogamous mammals are uniquely hardwired to be with others. So these negative feelings that so many of us are experiencing right now in a breakup often result from sometimes a mismatch or some other factors at play that cause a breakup. But we have a neuronal signal that tell us that being with a loved one makes us feel better, right? And it's the emotional equivalent of not eating when we're hungry, except now instead of skipping a meal, we are slowly starving. So we are literally hardwired to long for our exes. So when a breakup occurs, biology and neurochemistry say we're not the only ones who's longing. Like our exes are longing too. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So that's really fascinating. So for the first time ever, they're able to notice the neurochemicals, like the from a cellular level, this is going on.
Yeah. Right.
Wow.
So it's not just, again, remember when the voles hung out were like cuddling with, I don't know you voles, like your stranger voles, like the random.
So let's back it up, because I definitely have questions.
Okay.
Maybe you can be the teacher here. So the voles that were cuddling with the strangers,
Yeah.
this was after they had already had a loved one that they were separated with?
Yes.
Okay. So they're with the new stranger voles, and what exactly happened?
So what happened is that the brain activity was almost exactly the same with the mate versus the stranger. It was almost exactly the same.
So what does that lead us to believe?
So it was only right. So it's not just being together with a person. It's like the actual bond that you create, right? Like the physical touch. Does that make sense?
I guess I'm having trouble, but this is good because I feel like I'm going to learn something out of this.
Okay, so okay, being with a person is
let's use people as an example.
Okay. So let's say you're with your
Chris and Jen.
Okay,
right. Chris and Jen.
Chris and Jen. So for whatever reason, Chris and Jen are lonely, Chris is not around or Jen's not around. So Chris decides to, I hope Jen doesn't think
Don't
so.
use me. How
Okay.
dare you, Steve? Maybe
I
we
don't
shouldn't
want. I
use
don't
Chris
want
and
to
Jen.
trigger you though to make you think that Jen's cuddling with someone else. So,
Yeah,
this is so
you might
awkward.
see me get Sebastian out like the samurai sword and go hunt
Yeah.
like
So, okay. So Chris is cuddling with someone else. All right.
no. We should
Okay.
use fake ones. Let's do Bob and Sally.
Let's not. Let's. Okay. I'll just use myself, right? But also it's Anna, and let's just say I'm cuddling with a guy named Eric, and I'm cuddling with a guy named John. All right. So, okay. So I'm cuddling with John, and he's the guy that I'm with, right? But then I decide to cuddle with stranger Eric. Now, originally people thought that these scientists thought, oh, me cuddling with Eric will look the same as me cuddling with John.
Okay.
But that wasn't the case. Or they thought, oh, hold on, let me see. I'm looking at what I wrote. So, okay. So they assumed that.
I screwed you up with the
Yeah.
oh, let's not use Chris and Jen,
Okay. So basically, so let's say that my partner is John, right? And the random dude is Eric. So this paper assumed that me cuddling with John would look really different from me cuddling with Eric. Okay. But that wasn't the case. Brain activity looked exactly the same, whether I was cuddling with John or Eric.
Okay. So does that,
So
what can we infer from that, I guess, is
So what can we infer from that? So what causes the difference? The difference is the longer that we are paired, like the longer I'm with John, right? That is the stronger my bond with John neurochemically becomes, right? So a different cluster of cells that's related to connection and bonding lights up related to John, but it doesn't light up related to Eric. And why is that? Right? So why is that? It is because neurochemically there is longing for John versus longing for Eric.
And this really, to me, would boil down to the level of attachment or length of time you've been together with John, for example,
Yes.
versus Eric. Because
Yes.
you're together so long with John, when you do end up cuddling with Eric, the same longing doesn't exist with the new guy. It's the old guy that the longing exists.
Correct.
Do you know, this is purely speculation on my part, but do you know, like in their example, they looked at the brain waves between the two and they said, okay, they're pretty identical versus when they're cuddling with new people, but it's not until they're running towards the other person or see the other person that the longing begins.
Seeing and running toward, like the physical act of some sort of
A physical touch.
Yeah.
I wonder if that would bounce back so I wonder if there's like a minimum time in which the cells need to accumulate to feel that.
Well, if we look at other research that we point to when we talk about no contact, all right, and we've talked about this in the context of no contact, how no contact works on relationships of at least 3 months or more, right? So that means shorter relationships have weaker bonds, meaning that even if you've spent 24 hours every day together for 6 weeks, all right, that still is not enough time. It needs to be over a period of time longer than 6 weeks. The intensity does not mean anything. It is the length of time that matters.
Well, I guess, we see this happen all the time in the Facebook group, but we see it from the different perspective because what we're getting is women who want their exes back or men who want their exes back so badly because they've been together so long, they have trouble going and dating new people. So like they'll go on a date and they'll sit there and be like, it's not the same.
Right.
So it really has to do with the foundational aspect of how long that relationship was and the intensity and the care and the investment you probably put into it
Right.
physically and emotionally, and I guess even
Right.
monetarily in an odd way.
Well, this is really interesting because this goes back to another study that I found that was in the Journal of Neurophysiology, which talk about the feelings of romantic love trigger the brain's dopamine system, which drive us to repeat pleasurable experiences. So, what does all that mean? It's like, let me see if I can find it. So it was saying that the brain's natural opiates help encode the experience, and the oxytocin acts as a glue which forge those feelings of closeness. So oxytocin unleashes a network of brain activity that amplifies visual cues and colors and sounds. So the effects from your brain's natural opiates and dopamine in your romantic partner's traits leave a sort of neural fingerprint on you. And those preferences become honestly soft wired into your reward system, just like an addiction.
Hmm.
So even creatures so another study with animals. Rats, they are prone to promiscuity. Even rats are often primed to revisit their first pleasure inducing partner, according to a 2015 study. And it seems
Wow.
humans follow a similar pattern. So, like a recovering alcoholic, right, that craves a drink even after decades of sobriety, we can still be drawn to an ex. That means there's a complex physiology associated with romantic attachments that stays with us, honestly, for most of our lives. Even after we resolve a romantic relationship, humans have a remarkable ability to forget the bad parts and focus on the good ones, thus, no contact, right? Most people have a lost love that they wonder about, like someone who held your hand through really important moments and helped define you. This is nostalgia. And these feelings of nostalgia are very common, right? According to another study that I saw, it was a 3-part study from 2015. People benefit from the state that they refer to as nostalgic reverie. They reminisce about the past at some point in the day, several times a week, even on average. Almost no one reminisces on just once a month basis. It's possible that we think about the past because it's good for our well being. Apparently, nostalgic reverie can boost our mood, our feelings of self esteem, and our identity. What they found is they could promote, this particular study found that they could promote nostalgic reverie by exposing people to, websites that promote feelings of connection to past lovers. It was really
Hmm.
interesting. So,
Well, that's really interesting. So basically, what Anna's talking about is, yeah, your ex still cares. They're
yeah.
hardwired to care. But I guess also we should put an asterisk next to it as well and say your ex is more likely to care the longer they've been with you. And I would also say, kind of drawing upon that peak end rule. I was revisiting the research on the peak end rule today for a
Mm,
YouTube video that I was filming,
yeah.
and those peak experiences, in the past, I had always assumed that the peaks, so the peak end rule, basically, if you don't know what it is, it's like human beings, when they remember experiences in the past or they have memories, we don't remember the experience in the full like we assume we do. We remember it based on in 2 points, basically, like the peaks of the experience and the end of the experience. But the peaks can refer to both good and bad experiences. So if you had a relationship that is fraught with lots of fights throughout, sometimes it'll be harder to get that person to care for you than someone who doesn't have a ton of fights, but has a lot of positive moments in the bank, so to speak. So I think and I'm kind of interested to get your take on this. The research that you basically we're talking about here, and you were breaking down for me with the ridiculous Chris and Jen swaps. Um, uh,
Which we avoided
we
because
did, we
I
did. We
wanted
just
to keep your marriage very happy.
we put you on the hot seat with make believe people, which is
Yeah.
um,
I'm
but
okay.
basically the way I look at it is your ex is hardwired to care about you the longer they've been with you, but also the quality of that relationship has some indication on how much more likely they are to care about you. Would you say
Yeah.
that's an accurate statement?
Yes, I do. I mean, love research supports the notion that it's psychologically intoxicating to reconnect with an ex. The
That's
brain
true.
lights up the same way a cocaine addict does before a hit. The urge to reconnect with an ex or even think about an ex, therefore, makes sense. because the brain develops pathways based on learned patterns. So if you laid down a powerful pattern that this person was, for example, your life partner, your brain can retain traces of that circuitry, even if you've bonded with someone new. Experts say that the neurological attachment that happens between young people is not unlike the attachment a baby forms with its mother. So hormones like vasopressin and oxytocin are key in helping create a sense of closeness in relationships and play a starring role in both scenarios. Now, it's not just if this person was your first love. If you have another person who was your best love or your most emotionally intimate love, that mark is even more indelible. It's even stronger. That neurological attachment, that circuitry that's laid down, is definitely never going away. This preferential encoding in the brain is why there are so many stories about people reconnecting with long lost loves. It's because those loves, those intense loves, or those first loves, or those best loves, or those most emotionally intimate loves keep coming back over and over. Just not trying to be too graphic here, but for example, the first person you have your first orgasm with lays down a template for what you find attractive. That's just an example,
Interesting.
right?
Well, I guess it makes a lot of sense. I'm going back to like the first love example. There's
Mm-hmm.
That's probably why it feels so much more potent, you
Yeah,
know, like versus when you have you go on dates and you fall in love with another person. It's never quite the same experience as that other one. But I think what you said is incredibly insightful with regards to, just because they're your first love doesn't necessarily mean they're the best love or the
right,
strongest connection you'll ever feel with someone, and that almost trumps but it feels different, at least in my experience it has.
right.
um Overall though, I would say, yeah, your ex still cares about you, but there's
Mhm.
all these little signifiers that kind of make it a lot more likely, but even at the bare minimum, I think they still care about you.
Oh, yeah. They still care about you. I was just trying to describe it to was talking a little bit with my husband over dinner, and I was telling him about this research, and I said, I've had quite a few breakups, but there are three relationships that really stand out in my mind. Obviously him, right? And then my very first boyfriend, who was terrible.
That
uh,
seems to be that seems to be the experience I think everyone has.
yeah. Um,
It's like two really inexperienced people dating,
mhm.
and hopefully inexperienced unless you date like,
He was experienced, but he was just a cheater. But
yeah.
so there was him, and then there was a third one, the third one, but all the others are just sort of
The
like
third one. I love how you just slipped that under the,
the
yeah,
third
there's your
one. I
third one,
mean,
but the
okay,
third one we'll
the
just,
third the third one was the first person I ever had sex with, right? So that third one, but all the others kind of are in the same lump of like you are my exes. So I'm still attached to you, but the strength of that attachment is not as strong as these other three.
okay, so they're the
Right.
ones who laid the template down for what you are most likely to become attracted to, or rather yearn for, or
Yearn
have
for.
huge nostalgia feelings and long
Hmm.
for them.
Hmm. Right. And so it kind of goes into what is it that we're longing for. So there was also a study in the Journal of Research and Personality that said there are different psychological and demographic factors influencing life longings. And so life longings, there's a German word for it, and I don't even know if I'm going to pronounce it correctly. Sehnsucht? I don't know. But it's basically defined as intense desires for ideal states of life that are remote or unattainable. So,
I guess that's the ungettable
yeah, it's the ungettable
concept
stuff.
right there.
Right. That's basically it. So, there's a lot related to longing and the fear of vulnerability. Like relationship conflict can hide like one's own longing in our fear of vulnerability. We can experience longing for something that we had and lost, right? The Ziegnarik effect. Or we can long for something that we never had in the first place, right? The person may have already have a partner, but long for something more or maybe different that he or she believes will bring fulfillment. So frequently people will neglect to attend to their deeper needs in their choice of a partner, meeting other needs instead, such as security or shared values. As a result, they eventually hunger for a relationship that has more passion or vibrancy, right? So it could lead to a breakup ultimately, not understanding that they originally chose based on another set of values that they didn't communicate. Does that make sense?
It does. All this stuff is really fascinating. It's
Yeah.
it's 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 stuff that I don't think we've ever really talked about before, at least in on the public forum. You may have
No,
discussed it with private clients or so, but
no, I haven't. Like,
so it's brand new even for you.
yeah, I was looking into this stuff because when I was thinking, okay, how do I know that my ex cares about me? Right. And I thought, okay, well, I was like, I couldn't really find anything. And then I started looking up longing and I started looking up desire and I looked up yearning and I looked up nostalgia. And there's a lot of stuff out there, which if you put it together in the relationship context, essentially we are hardwired to long and yearn for and care for other people. So the question is, how do I should not be, does my ex care about me? Because the answer is yes, unequivocally, yes.
I guess it would be more of a question of why. Why do they care about you? Understanding that, and then potentially from there, you have a better understanding of how you can not necessarily manipulate it, but inspire it, you
Right.
know?
You want to be able to trigger those feelings of yearning and longing. So this is again why I think not only is no contact really important, it's the work that you do on yourself that's incredibly important. Also, when you finish your no contact, you need to have a plan in place. I mean, whether or not you coach, right? You should have a plan on how to contact, when to contact, what to say, what to do. This is where love languages become very important. Understanding whether or not whether your ex is introverted or extroverted, their attachment style, whatever that may be, an understanding of their relationship history and their family history, and just also understanding what you did and what your ex did to contribute to the breakup itself. There are a lot of factors at play.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, knowledge is power. All the
Yeah,
stuff you just said there is just getting more knowledgeable
yeah,
about yourself and your ex and how they respond to certain situations or what they're
right,
going to respond to, like with the love languages.
right.
But yeah, I mean, I agree with you totally. Like, I just had to write a 10,000 word article
Mhm,
on does your ex still care? And I like literally sit there and I'm thinking like, well, how do you know? And so I started looking at all the articles that we had ever written throughout
mhm,
ex-boyfriend recovery, and most of them don't talk about the science. They're always very detailed to like, okay, well, how do you know someone is caring about you versus someone who just wants to use you? Or what is just if my ex isn't very responsive towards me, does that mean they don't care about me? So most of the queries that we get on the website at least are very situational by
yeah,
nature,
right.
but one thing that they don't seem to ever understand is the science behind it or the
Yeah,
psychology or the psychoanalytical aspects of it.
yeah. The science behind it, which is the answer is yes, they do care. They are thinking about you. And let's assume that you have done the appropriate amount of work, done the no contact as needed. You've done the work on yourself. You are working on social media and sphere of influence as best you can. And you're approaching any interactions with your ex in as smart a fashion as possible. Right. And, the other part of it is understanding that some exes take time. Even if you understand all of these things, it's still only half of the equation. Your ex may not be as emotionally mature or as emotionally evolved as you.
It's true.
And if that's the case, you could understand all of these things and still just sit there twiddling your thumbs, waiting for that person to catch up to you. Ultimately, they may not, right? To me, that's where a lot of um, people who don't get their exes back, that tends to be the reason, right? My clients tend to be so much more evolved at that by that point that waiting for their exes is just too long for them, and they've got
Mhm.
personal goals to meet, such as I want to get married.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, uh, I also think what you said, what you were talking about, the science behind it, I couldn't help but think back to one of the big reasons I think people fail a lot of times or struggle is
Mhm.
they have some All right. So it's not enough just, I think, to understand this stuff. I think you also need to have the emotional control
Oh yeah.
to be able to act on it. And what I mean by that is simply knowing someone cares about you or your ex still cares about you isn't enough to make them commit to you.
Yes, correct.
And I think if you want to create those feelings of yearning or longing or nostalgia within your ex, you are going to have a hard time doing that if you don't have emotional control.
Right.
And I think
Right.
that's the real that's the real trick of the no contact rule, I think. It helps you gain emotional control. It
Right.
won't it won't complete the work. I mean, I think a lot of times in the breakup business, it's more how disciplined are you after the no contact rule is up too, and do you stop doing some of the holy trinity stuff? But overall, to me, when you were talking about all that, it's like, yeah, understanding it's great, but you also need to have the emotional control to do something about it, you
Right.
know. But
Yeah.
the thing that Anna just wrote out basically is like, I don't, there's definitely no one talking about it. We've never covered it, so it's
I
brand
mean,
new, folks.
in the realm of relationships, like it was really difficult for me to find all of this. So what I'm talking about now is stuff that I'm piecing together in the realm, yeah, in for relationship recovery. I think
Well,
it's
yeah,
fascinating. I mean, there's a
yeah.
lot more. We could talk about it like for weeks probably. I mean, there's a lot more on longing. There's a lot more about that plays into honestly attachment style and self-soothing and inner child work and traumatic disappointment in early childhood. There's so much other stuff that goes into this, but basically, what you want to do rather than wonder if your ex is longing for you, right? Or cares about you or is thinking about you, you need to be asking yourself, what can I do to trigger those feelings and position myself as the person, as the physical, real life embodiment of the things that my ex is longing for, right? And
So
is that is before you get on, and is what I'm trying to be is I try to be that physical embodiment of what my ex is yearning for. Is that consistent with who I am as a person? Right? Because I don't ever, and I don't want to give the impression or anyone listening to think that ERP is telling you to change who you are just to get in a relationship. No, this is about being true and authentic to yourself. So if your ex wants you to be someone, emotionally small and timid just so that he or she feels better about himself or herself, don't do that. Right? That's not the person for you, even if you do long for that person. Make sense?
well, I think also to piggyback off what you're saying there, a lot of the times what we're noticing, at least what I've noticed from interviewing real success stories, is the people who seem to be very successful in winning exes back seem to become more secure with themselves. And I'm not saying
Yes.
they're insecure to begin with, but a lot of times they exhibit insecure behaviors. And
Mhm.
by gaining emotional control, by putting the work in that Anna's basically saying, and like you were saying, like your clients, they're like, by the time they get to the end, they're sitting there and thinking, well, I don't want to wait around for them, and I've
Yeah.
got other stuff to accomplish here.
Mhm.
And then they start working on that other stuff, and then they come around because that longing and that yearning is at its height.
Mhm.
um each
And
of
the
those clients,
exits tend to come around at that point.
right, well, also each of those clients didn't change themselves.
No.
It's almost like they just decided to find the parts that they enjoy the most about themselves and
Yes.
highlight those parts and focus on those things. Um, Overall, though, we do get, unfortunately, some people who don't. It's almost like a paradigm shift. You have to kind of believe, and I think a lot of people come into this not believing that simply by doing those things, their ex can come back. They think like there has to be something I do to make them, some words I say to make them come back. And more often than
No,
not,
this is not magic.
it's not. And it takes time too. I think, you know, it's not if your ex cares about you, they do. It's about how can you create those feelings of longing, yearning, and nostalgia. And I would also add, like, if you want them to commit to you, they have to feel like they can lose you. And I think sometimes the problem is when you're coming to us, they don't feel that way. They feel like they have you or they can get you anytime they want. And
Mhm.
sometimes by going through the things that we want you to go through, like Anna was saying, you'll find that your ex does want you to be small. They do want to be able to lord things over you or dominate you emotionally, and you realize that's not the person for me. And that's also a good thing, because
Mhm.
that's also you standing up for yourself a little bit, but also realizing this is not someone you should be getting back. You
Right.
know, we
Right.
have told people, you have told people, Anna, for sure, you should not get back
Yes.
with this guy,
Hmm.
right? Or girl or
Yeah.
whoever.
I have said that. I even said that as recently as last week.
And unfortunately, those clients don't always love it. But I think it's also a situation where they know
Yeah.
it in their hearts. They just don't want it to be, they don't want the reality to be to reflect that.
And it's all I mean, I don't enjoy saying that, but especially in coaching sessions, when I'm saying delivering information like that, I say, look, this is our honest time between me and you pay me not to lie to you. And so I'm not saying this to be mean. So you should not get this person back for X, Y, and Z reasons. And you're very smart. You understand, what I'm saying.
It
But I
happens.
certainly understand. Yeah, it happens, and I do tell people, don't get this person back.
We're not going to lie to you.
No, it's our
We're
honest.
also, right. Well, we're also not going to tell you what you want to hear. We're going to tell you what we
No.
think and what probably works more often than not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Again, yeah. You don't pay us to lie. You pay us to help you be as smart as possible, to make really good choices for your own life, and hopefully positively put you on the right track related to your love life too. So
I
sometimes
couldn't
our
agree.
exes are just not the persons we should have back.
That's true. And oftentimes, just by admitting that, they come back. They like
Right.
want you back, which is a complicated problem to solve then, because you shouldn't be getting that person back, but that's the way
I
it
mean,
works.
this is part of longing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Longing will compel us to idealize a person we desire. And we create in our imagination a perception of perfection of the person in front of us, who, when exposed to reality, i.e., a breakup, leaves us sorely disappointed. So we think, oh, it was so amazing. We had the best relationship. No, along the way, there are a lot of bumps and there were a lot of red flags, or maybe a few red flags, right? So we have to sort of understand our own longing. How idealized is our longing? How truthful is our longing?
Yeah.
So there's even a lot of research about that.
So ultimately, what we're saying is there's not a ton of research out there specifically related to getting your ex back, but what we have done is we've found the most related research that we could find, essentially, to give us indications on what's working. And that's why Anna has like a over 70% success rate, and it might even be higher if you count the clients who decided they didn't want to get their exes back,
Yeah.
which puts her, I believe, over 90%. Or
Yes,
are
in
we
the mid 90s.
so we're squabbling over 5 percentage points now.
Well,
So
you're
that's
funny.
why you should coach with Anna. Um, so is there anything else on does your ex still care about you that we need to talk about, or do you think we got it covered?
There's a lot put out there, even in our own, website, about signs that our exes still care. I mean, everyone could easily research that and read it and listen to it, and it's all pretty much the same, right? But I think the one thing that you need to understand is, yes, does your ex still care about you? Yes. How do you know that? Biology,
Mm-hmm.
science, right?
It
Neurochemical.
backs it up, right?
Yeah.
It backs it up. It backs it
Like,
up.
there are literal neural pathways hardwired into your brain. And if it's hardwired into your brain, it's also hardwired into your ex's brain. So spend less time worrying about that, knowing that science says, yes, they do, and worry more about, what am I going to do to remove the roadblocks or the challenges that got in our way in the first place? Focus
Yeah.
on that instead.
I gotta say, every time we do one of these, I always learn so much, and it makes me
Yeah.
feel so bad. Like I'm like, oh man, Anna, she's so smart. I need to say something smart, and then you're like, oh yeah, and then this, and it just gets smarter and smarter, and I'm just
What are you
like,
talking about? You are
wait,
so smart too. What are
Well,
we?
hold on, Anna. It's like you need to explain to me how this worked again. So like I feel I'm only saying that I guess to make fun of myself a little bit, but also because I want you guys to realize Anna is the best. Like this is as good as it gets when it comes to X recovery, period.
What?
It's true.
Oh,
Don't even act like that. You know that.
okay. I mean, we are pretty cool. So I was really pleased. Like when I started finding all this science stuff, I was like, no other ex recovery person is going to be talking about
No. I mean, when you were breaking it down for me, I was like sitting there really trying to focus and listen. But then I got confused at the part that I made you go over like 10 times with the real human beings. Because I
Yeah.
was like, well, but what does that mean? But I get it now, and I'm glad that I did. And I'm glad that we recorded it so that I can look back when I'm trying to explain it for a YouTube video
Mhm.
and kind of hopefully not use myself as an example for
You
for
can use
the
me and my Eric and John examples if you want.
right. But yeah, I mean, overall, I'm just blown away, quite frankly. Like I'm just blown away. Here's to recap what we spent an hour talking about, which is basically like your ex just can't forget about you. It
Yeah.
is hardwired in their brain. They will not be able to forget about you. They're hardwired to care about you, and they're hardwired to care about you even more the longer you were together and the better the relationship was.
Mm-hmm.
So the question
Yes.
should not be, does my ex care about me? It should be, why does my ex care about me and what can I do about it? And we
What
kind
can
of
I do to trigger those positive nostalgic feelings? To
thank you.
trigger
Right.
longing? What can I do to trigger that? If you can
And,
figure that out, you have a much greater chance of getting your ex back.
and also, if you want to figure that out, coach with Anna. She'll tell you how to figure it out.
We'll talk about it.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
So, how's coaching going?
Coaching is going really well. I'm full this week and most of next week. So I do have some sessions open on the 22nd and onward.
Well, sign up, folks. Sign
Yeah.
up.
Come hang out with me. I like to talk
If
to people.
if you're
I will.
listening to this and you're at work or something and you're like, you know what, I need to talk to someone about this breakup, Anna is the person for you.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
um so yeah, that's it for me. Anything else you want to add?
No, I think this is a really good one, though. This is one of my favorites just because we came up with really new stuff.
You came up with some really new stuff and I'm just like, explain it to me, Anna, I need help.
I'm really excited for people to hear this. I think this will
Me
be very
too.
helpful. Yeah.
All right, well, we'll see you guys next time. Thanks for showing up or listening or watching this, and we'll be back next week. What are we talking about next week? Do
Yeah.
we
What
even
are we
know?
talking about next week? I
Can we
mean,
do texting? I'm writing a texting article right now, so that
Yeah.
maybe
Let's
something
talk
about
about
texting.
texting. Yeah.
Let's just it'll be something related to texting. So,
Something about texting.
all
texting
right,
stuff. Okay.
texting stuff.
Okay.
Bye bye, everyone.
Bye.